My sister Vanessa Guillen was sexually harassed, yet nothing was done to it. For her lacks of responsibility, safety, and respect, because they didn't respect my sister. They didn't keep my sister safe. They always try to cover up for each other. Why? My sister's a human too. She deserves respect. She deserves to be heard.
That's the sister of Vanessa Guillen, the soldier at Fort Hood, who was found murdered. And what she is complaining about is that her sister had made complaints to the family that she had been sexually harassed at Fort Hood. And all of a sudden she goes missing and nothing's being done, and the family has to make enough noise to get the investigation going, and they're still not satisfied with the answers that they're getting. And obviously they're incredibly heartbroken and upset and angry about the murder. And along with the murder is the whole culture of what is happening at Fort Hood. Chanley Painter has a closer look tonight.
The guy outranks her. He's bigger than her. So, okay, so he's not in her command. That's not a reason to say, oh no, there's no sexual harassment.
Attorney Natalie Kawam represents the family of murdered soldier Vanessa Guillen. They maintain Guillen was sexually harassed by fellow soldier Aaron Robinson, despite denials from Army Command.
The criminal investigation has not found any connection between sexual harassment and Vanessa's disappearance.
Robinson is suspected of beating Guillen to death with a hammer on the Fort Hood Army post April 22nd and allegedly recruiting his married girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, to bury Guillen's dismembered remains. Military investigators suggest Robinson killed Guillen because she threatened to expose his affair with Aguilar. Kawam and the Guillen family aren't buying it.
They should have came to the American people and said, we screwed up. We lost a great soldier that did nothing wrong. But they didn't say that. Instead, they denied any wrongdoing. They denied the truth. And in fact, they lied because they said that there was no sexual harassment.
Guillen's murder revived concerns about a toxic culture toward women in the military and the code of silence that enables it.
Just because we don't see the problem doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Guillen's death sparked calls for an independent investigation and changes to the military's reporting structure for sexual misconduct.
Confidentiality is a key factor in people reporting, and if they feel that their the victimization or their story isn't going to be confidential, they're very hesitant.
There has to be a system in place that provides for a neutral third-party agency to review that complaint. It has no skin in the game.
The U.S. Army Forces Command sent a team to Fort Hood to inspect its sexual harassment prevention program, known as SHARP. According to the Department of Defense, the number of reports of sexual assault from service members has been on the rise since 2012. From 2018 to 2019 alone, the number of reports rose 3%, the DoD said in a report. In 2018, among active duty members, an estimated 24% of women and 6% of men said they experienced sexual harassment, up from 21% of women and 5% of men in 2016. Kawam said Guillen did not report through her chain of command because she feared blowback, and it appears she was not alone. In the wake of her death, service members are sharing their stories using the hashtag #IamVanessaGuillen.
They're talking about how they were sexually harassed, sexually assaulted, demonized for saying something, beat up for saying something, kicked out for saying something.
The accounts echo what service members have said in surveys conducted by the Defense Department. Most incidents occur between people ages 17 to 24 who work or live together, and most reports come from junior enlisted women just like Guillen, whose alleged attacker is the same rank or one grade higher. Guillen's death has cast a harsh spotlight on Fort Hood, a city within the city of Killeen, Texas.
No one is safe on that base, and that's why we need a congressional investigation.
In March, 14 people were arrested in a prostitution sting, including 6 active duty members accused of agreeing to pay money for sex. The scandal is just another sign of the troubling culture that exists on the military base. Aware Central Texas is the family violence center just outside the gates of Fort Hood. Executive Director Misty Biddick says an influx of active duty service members has reached out for treatment, as Guillen's story has spread through post.
When I see an influx of individuals that have the ability to seek services on post, seeking services off post, and not wanting any of that information to go to their command, that to me paints a picture that there is some distrust.
We are talking about soldiers here, okay? These are people who are voluntarily enlisting to serve their country. Country has an obligation to keep them safe. You've got enough enemies around the world. We don't need enemies preying on our soldiers on the right on the grounds of where they're being trained and where they're working. This is outrageous. Let's bring Chanley Painter in. Chanley, this really, is horrible. We're talking about soldiers, people, men and women, as we saw in your piece, men and women who are dedicating their lives to serve their country and to protect us. They need to be protected, and I can't believe they need to be protected here at home. What's being done to address this problem?
Yeah, that's a great question, because Vanessa Guillen's murder there's been calls for change from Fort Hood all the way to Washington, across the nation, as you can imagine. And Fort Hood has actually requested the Army to do an independent or a separate investigation. They called in the U.S. Armed Forces Command to send in the Inspector General's team to evaluate that SHARP program that we talked about in the story. And SHARP stands for Sexual Harassment Assault Response Prevention Program. This inspection team focused on these three objectives: examining the SHARP program's implementation at Fort Hood, assessing whether the command's climate is supportive of soldiers reporting incidents of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and then identifying any potentially systematic issues with the SHARP program at Fort Hood, as well as any resource constraints. The team will brief Fort Hood and the Army Forces Command on their findings of that inspection for the program. And this inspection, Vinny, was requested even though the Army last week in the press conference found that there was no support for Vanessa Guillen's family's allegations of sexual harassment in her case, saying that sexual harassment was not related to her murder, saying they interviewed hundreds of people and couldn't corroborate those claims. Of course, Vanessa Guillen's family strenuously disagrees with that. The attorney I spoke to, Natalie Kawam, says that she feels that the co-workers of Vanessa Guillen are just scared and intimidated to come forward. Again, going back to this culture there at Fort Hood, she says that she personally talked to a fellow soldier of Vanessa Guillen who said that Vanessa confided in him about the sexual harassment coming from Aaron Robinson. So it's a very much contentious issue. In fact, the family of Vanessa Guillen is calling for a congressional investigation.
Yeah, the family attorney, very passionate and connected to the cause here. She's been working with lawmakers, hasn't she?
She has been working with lawmakers. She was telling me about a bill that she's drafting, and I'll let her explain it. Let's take a listen.
The bill's going to provide our military members, service members, with a right to be able to file a sexual harassment complaint or assault with an independent agency that is not part of the command or the unit as they have right now presently. So for example, if you were sexually harassed or sexually assaulted by your sergeant or your commander or whatever it be, even someone higher ranked than you, the person who normally would be reviewing this or dealing with this, it's called a SHARP, and that person is part of the same unit, the same command as you are as a harasser is. So you have it's not a neutral person, it's not a person that's removed or independent. And that's where the problem is.
She says what is in place now is a broken system, and she's only asking for what already is in the private sector should be provided for in the military as well, so that future Vanessa Guillens are prevented, Vinny.
Yeah, the bottom line, I can't say this enough. I mean, all that soldiers sacrifice and give up to protect us. We collectively need to be able to protect them, especially at home. Outrageous. Channeling Painter, thank you so much. Important story.